but Havlicek steals it. Havlicek stole the ball. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
United to Alici. Alici powers in.
Won their sixth NBA championship.
Gibson, swing. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable. I don't believe what I just saw.
Hello, I'm Chris Fowler for SportsCentury. In the most elemental of sports, Smokin' Joe Frazier employed a simple form of math. 4 for 1. He would let you hit him 4 times if he could hit you once, especially if the once was that wrecking ball left hook. He was the most honest of heavyweights, a relentless no-frills laborer whose fights with Muhammad Ali will forever be remembered as an epic trilogy of courage, savagery, and skill.
Joe Frazier would come out smoking. If you hit him, he liked it. If you knocked him down, you only made him mad.
Joe was a machine. That Philadelphia left hook has a life all its own. It's almost like it's got a brain, it's got desire, it's got hungers, it's got needs.
I remember him lifting Dave Zieglowitz off the canvas with a left hook. Just literally lifted him into the air and deposited him like 5 feet away.
You don't want to throw a right hand with Joe Frazier. The first day I boxed with him, I threw a right hand. When I threw it, he slipped and he hit me with a hook to the kidneys and a hook to the head. He doubled up. Bang, bang.
If he hit you in the kidneys, you'd pass blood for a month. And if he'd hit you in the ribs, you wouldn't breathe right for 6 months. And if he hit you in the jaw, you were down.
Joe's physique determined his style. He had to get close to an opponent to do any damage. So he had to come straight ahead. He wasn't going to be a fancy finesse kind of fighter.
All he did was just come at you. You know, he's come at you. God damn it, he'd kill you.
You know, he didn't even have the body of a heavyweight. All his weight was on his backside and his legs.
He was greatly admired as a prize fighter because he was in the Dempsey Marciano tradition of fighter, brawlers, aggressive guys who were willing to take whatever you could give them.
One man gave him all he could handle and absorbed as much in return. Over 5 years, splattered with contempt, insult, and bitterness, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali engaged in what has been called a blood trilogy.
The great heavyweight needs to be tested in a way that leaves no doubt, to bring out all his great gifts, and Frazier did that with Ali.
Ali was always center stage. Ali had the gift of gab, he had the lines, he had the charisma.
All Joe Frazier will see all night is that left and right. That's all Joe Frazier will see. I'm the king, and the world is going to know I'm the king.
Poor Joe was just overwhelmed by Ali. He just couldn't measure up.
Ali was the sun compared to everyone else being a light bulb. So it was natural that Joe Frazier didn't get the kind of attention that Ali did.
What attention Frazier did get was that of a bull to a matador, especially in the arena of public debate, where the rules of engagement favored Ali's verbal skills. From 1971 to 1975, Frazier's psyche was peppered unmercifully with viperish, acid-tipped jabs.
He branded Joe Frazier in a way that was very cruel. But it wasn't done by accident. It was done to gain a psychological advantage.
The cruelty towards Frazier was, just bad taste.
Ali could be cruel in and out of the ring. He understood psychological warfare. He understood how you tried to build up an event. And to him, it was all fun and games.
It's the biggest fight because for the first time you've had a witty, quick, fast-talking heavyweight champ. When the most of asking the question, how do you feel, champ?
Ali, at the same time, was a new kind of black man. He was one who certainly used his opponents as straight men and did not hesitate to cast them in the roles of Uncle Toms. Frazier was certainly not that, and he did not see himself as that.
He knew perfectly well that Joe was one of the blackest men in the universe. For him to be viewed as a white, sucking Uncle Tom kind of guy was the greatest insult you could give a guy who was nothing but raging black.
When he called Joe Frazier a gorilla, and he made fun of the darkness of his skin and the wideness of his nose and the bigness of his lips.
Frazier, if he was here, nose turned that way, ears turned that way.
He was touching, some real sore spots. And he was despised by a lot of African Americans.
Muhammad Ali knew his audience. What he was doing was casting himself as blacker than thee. And for someone that came up, son of a sharecropper, that had to cut very deeply with Joe. Joe saw himself for what he is. He's a black man, and he's a proud black man. He didn't understand why there needed to be that particular division.
The whole thing just baffled Joe. What is he doing? What is he talking about? And then from that came the anger and the bitterness and the resentment.
For a time, you genuinely disliked this man. He still does? For all the hurtful things he said.
That's not true.
Come on.
Before you're quick to criticize him for holding a grudge as long as he has and as deeply as he's held it, maybe it would be advisable for people to put themselves in his position and walk a mile in his shoes. A line was drawn in the sand. At some point, it stopped being a line in the sand. It was cast in concrete.
At the 1996 Olympics that were in Atlanta, Ali, in a scene that lives on even now, showed up in this white suit to light the flame to begin the Olympics. Joe Frazier and I were talking, and I said, "Did you see Ali?" Yeah, I saw him. And oh, the anger right away. He said, "If it had been me, I'd have pushed him into the flame." I said, "Oh, Joe, you don't really mean." Yeah, I do.
The fact that Muhammad called Joe an Uncle Tom, the fact that he told him how ugly he was, the fact that he was going to get the gorilla in Manila, the fact that he was called a white man's champion, all those things were done and said supposedly to make those three fights happen as they did. They did just what they were intended to, but they hurt Joe, and they hurt deep.
To this day, Joe Frazier still abhors Muhammad Ali.
Revenge lasts a whole lifetime. And it's pretty easy to understand where Joe gets most of this, because there are a lot of blood feuds down there.
Down there was coastal South Carolina, where Joe Frazier was taught early and well about the differences between black and white. Born in January of 1944, Joe and 10 siblings were raised by sharecropping parents who sweated every nickel and dime to put food on the table.
When Joe Frazier was growing up in Beaufort, South Carolina, it was the hunger capital of America, and that's a fact. It had the highest infant mortality in America.
There were holes in the roof, and the rain used to pour through, or the sunshine. And the outhouse was about 100 yards away. There are hardly any lights there. The only light was moonlight.
By 15, Joe, already known locally as a tough kid, had 2 jobs. One by day, under the eye of the white man, the second under cover of darkness.
He used to run moonshine, white lightning at night with his father through the swamps, and then worked by day in the fields. So one day he interfered with the field boss, who was about to whip up on a black kid, and thereafter he was in danger and made his way up to Brooklyn.
But the big city posed a different set of pitfalls for the country boy.
New York was more of like a rough life for me. Unfair, unkind. This wasn't going to work.
In 1961, he headed to Philadelphia and found work in a meatpacking house. When Frazier wasn't lugging sides of beef, he was working out in the local gym.
Joe was overweight, which is what brought him into the gym in the first place, Police Athletic League gym.
Joe was like a guy who might not have had the greatest of skills, but had 1,000% work ethic and was willing to learn and worked at it very hard.
So hard, in fact, that in 1962, he won the first of 3 straight Middle Atlantic Golden Gloves titles. In the summer of 1964, Frazier replaced an injured Buster Mathis as heavyweight on the U.S. Olympic team in Tokyo. Beating Germany's Hans Huber for the gold medal, Frazier won glory and little else, except a broken left thumb.
Joe Frazier came back from the Olympics in Tokyo with his thumb in a cast. He busted it before the championship fight. Couldn't go back to work in the slaughterhouse at Cross Brothers, pushing the sides of beef around. So here he was, a hero with a gold medal and an empty bank account.
He basically didn't have a job. He needed people to come in and basically save him because, you know, he couldn't pay his bills.
I came home, hand broke, busted, wasn't going to have a Christmas for my kids.
I was doing sports on WCAU radio, and I thought what a bleak Christmas it would be for the kids. So I started a campaign encouraging the listeners to contribute toys for the kids, and we got a nice response, and the kids had a decent Christmas.
In 1964, Frazier received some bad news after an eye examination. A condition known as cataracts was clouding the lens of his left eye, seriously impairing his vision.
So what I said to the doctors, would it get any better? They said it ain't gonna get no better, that's for sure. So it was really up to me.
Whether he shared this with anybody else, I don't know. I suspect he did not. When he took the vision test, they always routinely asked the right eye first, which is his best eye. So he would take his right hand and cover his left eye and read the chart with his right eye. Then they would ask him to read it with his left eye. So he would take his left hand but cover his left eye and again read it with his right eye. But by using the 2 different hands, they thought he was using different eyes, and that's how he fooled them.
His whole style was sort of built around this. He had to move his opponent always to his own right to get off that left hook, and actually try to avoid getting hit on that left side. It's an extraordinary feat.
Once more, out of adversity, Frazier fought on, developing and strengthening his left hook into a battering ram. Meanwhile, his financial prospects improved when some Philadelphia boxing fans bankrolled his future.
They called themselves Cloverlay. They put out 80 shares at $250 a share, $20,000, so that he could devote all of his time to prize fighting.
I think Joe liked the idea of being able to have a steady job. The people were really reputable. So I think that would sway Joe to come along with Cloverlay.
In from the financial cold, Frazier generated nothing but heat in the gym. But to reach the next level, he needed someone to direct and promote his career. That person was brash, self-styled Philly trainer Yank Durham, who took Frazier's life apart piece by piece.
He was loud. He was sometimes obscene. He just had his own way about getting Joe to listen in the gym.
Yank was gruff on the exterior, but he was very gentle and very paternalistic, and also a brilliant mind as a boxer. He was his guru. You know, he was the guy that taught him the rudiments of boxing.
And from those rudiments, Frazier began to build himself into a title contender. From 1965 to 1967, Frazier burned a hole through the heavyweight division until he stood ready to challenge Ali for the heavyweight crown. Then, history stepped in the way.
Temporarily at least, it is all over for the heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali. He is rejected induction into the military service. What happens now to his title?
With Ali disenfranchised, an 8-man elimination tournament was held to determine his successor.
Frazier didn't want to go into the tournament. I think they were concerned, A, he might have to fight somebody they weren't ready to fight yet, and B, that he would not get the lion's share of the gate, which he had already proven he was an attraction.
Frazier, under Durham's advice, boycotted the elimination tournament and signed to fight Buster Mathis for the New York State Championship. After disposing of Mathis with an 11th round knockout in March of 1968, Frazier owned a title, but not the crown.
The only way they can take my title will be in the ring. And I've been telling the world for the past 4 years that I'm history's greatest prize fighter, and the only way they can prove that I'm not is to get me beat in the ring.
The Ali camp was moving all around the country and the world trying to get Ali licensed to box.
Joe Frazier, went to Washington to try to get him his license back. Joe Frazier helped him both privately and publicly.
Frazier wanted to fight Ali. I'm not quite sure it was this magnanimous gesture of helping a fellow human being, which is why Joe Frazier was trying wherever he could to help Ali get a license.
Whether he was dealing purely from his heart or had his eye on a huge payday, Frazier not only lobbied for the exiled Ali, but he helped him get through a lean moment or two. In either case, the payback was hurtful and confusing.
Joe didn't understand why he, after having that kind of Kodak moment, you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden, Ali goes from Jekyll to Hyde on him.
If he befriends you and trusts you, I think that's what hurt him so much, I believe, with Ali. He gave him himself and was helping a friend that he thought was his friend, and then I believe he got played.
Ali used his mouth to dominate everything. He couldn't let you think you were dominating him.
Joe had heard Ali over the radio call him ugly, a coward, and Uncle Tom. He was so shocked and stunned by it because he had just been talking about how Ali could do anything he wanted to in the ring and what a great fighter he was, that he threw down the radio and crushed it with his foot.
And Joe goes to the window of his gym and just puts his fists and glares out the glass.
Joe wanted to pick a tire iron up, and he wanted to straighten it out right there.
Traffic stops on Broad Street in Philadelphia. People are out their cars.
In a street fight like that, Joe would have destroyed him utterly.
I don't know what they were really thinking. I guess they thought they were going to really see Ali and Frazier maybe get to scuffling or tussling or something.
The action itself was bravado because he knew that Frazier wasn't going to get involved in a street fight. It's again another plank in his whole effort to reduce Frazier.
Ali's betrayal so enraged Frazier that he reportedly went to Muhammad's home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and from the doorstep declared war on the man he thought was his friend. In the process, Frazier had turned himself into a political symbol.
So he became the demon, Joe, the fighter of the right. The reason why we were in Vietnam, the fact is that no one had experienced the black life more than Joe had.
My skin is blacker than him. I grew up in a ghetto. He grew up in the suburbs. He's making me the white guy because he has a gift from God that he can talk better than me. He said his sons were taunted in school and called Gorilla Jr., and he felt dehumanized by Ali's tongue.
I would say to my mom, why is Mr. Ali saying these things about Daddy? In school, I would get in a lot of trouble, man. I'll be fighting, and, because God said, man, your dad's a time. I said, what? Yo, we gonna fight about that. My dad's no time,
I had to get security, man, for my kids. That was unnecessary.
I mean, it was only two guys fighting, you know. Why I had to go to that point of trying to put my sons and my daughter.
In February of 1970, Frazier met Jimmy Ellis, Ali's former sparring partner who had won the elimination tournament Joe had spurned. Frazier registered a TKO in the 5th round. Still, in the eyes of many, Frazier had not yet climbed the mountain.
He wins the New York title, and everybody says, yeah, where's Ali? He knocks out Jimmy Ellis, wins the WBA title, and they say, that's Ali's sparring partner. This is a terrible, frustrating thing for Joe Frazier.
And I won't wait till that say the fellow who said he was going to give a belt to somebody. I want to retire till he come back.
8 months later, a new ring life was born for Ali. Licensed by Georgia, he dispatched Jerry Quarry in Atlanta. 6 weeks later, he defeated Oscar Bonavena in New York. Meanwhile, Frazier was waiting. But when they signed on December 30th to fight for the title, a political maelstrom revolved around them.
This is the 60s, leading into the 70s, and America was totally polarized, and this polarized America even more. It became a black-white fight, an American, anti-American fight. The whole country is in a frenzy about this thing.
Ali was cast in a mantle that said he stood for given things that were accepted by a lot of people. On the other side, Joe Frazier, who was just a hard hat fighter, had been adopted by those who thought they could put their blessings and favoritism and rooting interest in a man who was going to support their side.
It was black versus white, it was young versus old, it was right versus left, it was anti-war versus pro-war. That's what it was about. It wasn't about a fight.
I'm tired of all these undertone Negroes. You talk from two sides of your mouth. One to the white and one to the black.
Fueled by such polarizing hostility, Madison Square Garden sold out in a day. Millions more would be made in theaters around the world via closed-circuit sales.
The Garden inside and outside was almost riotous. For blocks around, it was choked with people. It was not unlike Times Square on a New Year's Eve. There's something about the night of a heavyweight championship fight. You can feel it in the air. It's raw and it's primal, and there's the smell of bloodlust, and it was thick and powerful that night.
The Madison Square Garden crowd was more vocal than anything I have ever heard at any sporting event ever. No matter what its size, they never let up from the moment those two fighters came in view. It was the most electric moment I have ever experienced.
And so, at last, on March 8, 1971, Frazier and Ali confronted each other before the world, each a symbol of opposing views on politics, race, and manhood. Even their boxing techniques were vastly different.
Frazier only had one way of fighting, and that was volume of punches. Boom, 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 bore in, go straight ahead, take 3 punches to deliver 1. Ali had to adjust to that.
Don't you know, God? I said, God, you're in the wrong place tonight. I'm kicking butt and taking name.
Through the first 8 rounds, the 27-year-old Frazier was ahead on 2 scorecards and even on the 3rd.
In the 9th round, suddenly Ali came alive and started flailing away and with hard, clean combinations, and that sort of stopped Frazier in his tracks.
In the 11th, the champion retaliated with a fusillade of left hooks. For the next 3 rounds, each fighter pounded the other with full weaponry to an almost levitating roar of 20,000. Then, in the last round, Frazier put Ali right where he wanted him.
Joe Frazier leaped about, it seemed, 7 feet in the air and threw this left hook, and it was flush.
And he caught him right on the chin and down.
March 8, 71, I cried my eyeballs out. Cried my eyeballs out. Not just because he lost, but because he symbolized so much. It wasn't about sports. It was about wars, about race, it was about politics, it was about society, it was about generations. Add to that it was 2 undefeated heavyweight champions. Pretty big stuff.
However satisfying, Frazier's victory would almost cost him his life.
Frazier goes to the hospital, and within 2 days, my phones are banked with calls that he's dead.
We thought Joe was in the hospital, in intensive care.
His kidneys shut down. He said somebody came in the room and just touched his hand, and he said he never saw the person again, I never know, but he said he thought it was an angel that touched him and said, hey, it's gonna be all right.
This basically captured people's best and worst of all feelings. And maybe it was those people that were calling me who hoped he was dead because he destroyed their symbol.
Ali had done an interview the next day with his jaw swollen and said, look how pretty I am. Who do you think won that fight?
They can call him the champion, but I'm the champion. I whooped him. I don't care what a few officials say.
People said, well, maybe you won, maybe you didn't. Problem is, they didn't give Joe credit. Joe beat Muhammad Ali on that night. That's all there was to it, period. He beat him.
Now, what you guys gonna say now? What can you say now? Huh?
I mean everybody a liar, and I mean everybody a believer. I was the butterfly.
Back in the boxing ring, Frazier made short work of lesser lights Terry Daniels and Ron Stander. Waiting in the wings, however, was a man who stirred fear in the heart of the Frazier camp. 6'3", 217-pound George Foreman.
Conventional wisdom is that Joe took the fight over Yancey Durham's objections, that Yank didn't want him to fight Foreman, and Joe's pride got in the way, and he said, make the fight. And they did, and the discrepancy in size and strength is obvious right from the weigh-in.
He thought he could beat George because George was never a great fighter. He's just a strong guy, big son of a bitch, and could punch.
You saw the left hook land on Foreman. That's what he'll be working on all night.
Joe was hitting him, but he couldn't hurt him.
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
When my father fell the first time, I started laughing, man. I was like, Daddy, stop playing, Daddy. Why you playing? And then I could hear Cosella.
Foreman is all over Joe Frazier. Frazier is down again.
When my father fell the second time, man, I got mad. I was like, Daddy, stop playing. Why you playing, Daddy?
2 knockdowns in the first round of Joe Frazier. Down again.
And then the reality hit me. After about 3 or 4 more times he fell, I was like, man, Daddy's not playing. And that was the first time in my life that I realized that my dad was human.
Frazier's knees buckled. He is down. He is down for the 4th time in the fight.
To have Joe Frazier down almost 6 times, probably the greatest moment of my professional career to that point.
A quick left from Joe. Another. Frazier is down for the 5th time in this fight.
Couldn't believe it was happening. I just couldn't believe it.
Joe is standing. There he goes.
And I kept knocking him down because I was afraid he was going to get up and get me.
It is over. It is over. It is over in the 2nd round. George Foreman is the heavyweight champion of the world.
7 months after his loss to Foreman in January of 1973, Frazier suffered another setback. His alter ego, mentor, and manager, Yank Durham, died following a stroke. Although close friend and cornerman Eddie Futch stepped in to fill the void, Frazier's desire seemed on the wane. But the coals within him stirred when he signed to fight Ali again, and their dirty pre-fight dancing resumed.
Why you think I'm making? Sit down, Joe. Huh? Sit down, quick. Why you think I'm making? The brothers are here. Doing this too?
Whatever happened, something happened, and Frazier went crazy.
Sit down, quick, Joe.
Well, we're having a scene, as you can see.
There are people to this day who think Cosell may have instigated the whole thing, but he didn't. I mean, Ali instigated the whole thing.
It's hard to tell whether it's clowning or for real between the 2 fighters.
I think Howard was astonished. He was absolutely astonished. And I think he thought it was real and somebody was going to get hurt, maybe him.
This kind of thing has been going on all along in terms of promotion of the fight, and this time it seems to be for real.
Here was real emotion, and Ali being Ali and Frazier being Frazier, it was quite a moment.
In contrast to the sound and fury of the promotion, the 12-round bout was relatively uneventful as Ali won by decision in January of 1974. While Frazier stewed, Ali rumbled in the jungle, regaining his crown by knocking out Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire. In July of 1975, Frazier and Ali agreed to a third match.
Each man had won one. This was the tiebreaker. This was the penultimate fight.
There was something much more important at stake. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier were fighting for the heavyweight championship of each other. They both understood that whoever won this fight, well, that's who history was going to recognize as the greater fighter.
In the days leading to the Thrilla in Manila, Ali beat a steady tattoo on Frazier's psyche.
It will be a killer and a chiller and a thriller when I get the gorilla in Manila.
If you call a guy a gorilla, or you ugly, you know, or you Uncle Tom, that's not funny.
Come on, gorilla, we in Manila.
He knew that I was tough. He couldn't frighten me with his words. So he went with another tactic of calling me a Tom. And then from Tom, I was ugly.
He's so ugly, his face should be donated to the Bureau of Wildlife.
Joe was in his hotel room on the balcony, and Ali had gone there to taunt him. Joe just stared at him while Ali shouting epithets at him. And Joe, finally disgusted, just walked in and said to Eddie Fudge, she said, no matter what happens, don't stop this fight. We have nowhere to go. I want to take his heart out and squeeze it and to see the blood squirt up.
With his hatred of Ali brimming over, Frazier was blinded by more than rage.
At that time, the vision in his right eye was 20/50, which is okay, not very good, but the left eye was 24/100, which was legally blind. My thoughts were before the fight, the Thriller in Manila, was that he shouldn't fight. If he had any damage to his good eye, that would be the end of him.
And here's Joe Frazier coming into the ring.
The challenger, Joe Frazier. The heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali.
On a sweltering morning of October 1st, 1975, in Quezon City, just outside Manila, the last act of their blood trilogy played out before the world.
It's 15 rounds, and here is round one.
It was a fight in three parts. The first part, Ali is just whipping on Frazier. Somehow, in the middle rounds, Frazier comes through. Frazier starts wailing, he cuts off the ring, he gets him on the ropes. He was killing Ali. And then it turned again.
Ali tried to regain the psychological edge by looking at him and saying, Joe Frazier, they told me you were washed up. And Frazier said, they told you wrong, pretty boy.
Frazier is very strong and scoring heavily, even though he took a lot in this round.
Closest to life and death I've ever seen. To equally matched fighters at the top of their form with an intense competitive edge on each other, if not dislike, actual hatred, if you will. It didn't seem that you could survive that.
And Ali is scoring on him.
The kind of torture that Ali and Frazier dished out to each other in the heat of Manila, with everything that was at stake between them mentally and psychologically, yeah, I don't think near death is too hyperbolic a statement.
Joe got hit with a right-hand shot that knocked his mouthpiece about 6 feet back in the audience.
Frazier was gone. Joe could not see, and Ali could keep wailing away at will with that jab in his eyes.
Frazier's badly hurt.
His good eye, the right eye, was starting to close. It was all puffed up. And I knew he couldn't see hardly anything out of his left eye. If you have somebody there who's just not able to protect themselves, this is a very dangerous situation.
With one eye closed and the other all but sightless, Frazier was operating by sound, touch, and smell in the 14th round.
He wasn't picking up those right hands, and he wasn't moving Ali to his right. So that eye was out there, and Ali kept banging away and digging into it, and large islands seemed to emerge around that eye.
Frazier looked awful tired, is puffed around both eyes now.
It looked like Ali was going to have to quit in the corner because he was getting so beat up. He couldn't breathe. He said in the corner, "I feel like I'm dying. This must be what death feels like."
In the opposite corner, Eddie Futch was caught in the grim reality of the moment.
Futch hesitated before that round. Questions spun through his mind like a subway train out of control. Well, I don't want to see him get hurt. He's got a family. He's a good kid. You know, I want him to walk away from this.
I said, "It's all over, Joe." And he jumped up. And I just tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Sit down."
I told Ed, I said, "Let me go out." He said, "You can't see," and I know it. I said, I can visualize it. Go on. Don't worry about it. He said, "No." So I said, "Okay." Shut it down.
I think it's going to be over. It's all over.
In the aftermath, while both fighters tended to their injuries, Ali tried to bridge the gap he created with Frazier by employing some second-hand diplomacy.
After the fight, he asked for me. He said, "Hey, I just want you to know, and you can tell your dad that those things I said about your dad, I didn't mean those things." But then I told my dad, my pop said, "Well, he needs to come to me." He said, "Tell him to come and tell me."
Ali's insults had cut too deep to be healed by anything less than a personal apology. Without it, Frazier carried his inner scars into a future fired by rage over the public theft of his dignity. After Manila, Frazier's ring career spiraled downward. After being knocked out by Foreman 8 months later, Smokin' Joe ground to a halt. He came back to fight once more in 1981 and finished with a 32-4-1 record.
The Jumbo Cummings thing was a sin. Joe had no business getting back in the ring. Since that fight, I had seen Joe coherent and bright-eyed and full of goodwill. And there are times when I've seen him slurring his words, being surly, not the normal Joe Frazier.
In 1985, he and his wife Florence filed for divorce after more than 20 years, and Frazier eventually moved into a loft apartment above his gym where he trained local talent. One was a member of his family.
He was not a promoter. He was not a mainstream trainer, but he was Joe Frazier, the former heavyweight champion of the world, who decided to become a trainer.
I started fighting because when my father lost to Ali in 75, more than anything in the world, I wanted to bring the heavyweight championship of the world back to the Frazier family. As I was standing in the middle ring with tears streaming down my cheeks, I could see him walking through the ropes, walking towards me. He grabbed me and he said, "Hey, son, don't worry about it. Daddy loves you. You my son. I don't care if you've been knocked down. I don't care if they call you a bum. You my son. I love you."
When Marvis retired in 1988, Frazier tried to make a champion of Joe Jr. But when he drifted into a life of crime and drugs, his father withdrew almost completely from public life. Afflicted by cataracts, diabetes, and high blood pressure, the great fighter had become an afterthought, even in his hometown.
I think the total slap in the face was when they were going to put the Rocky statue in Philadelphia and not put a statue of Joe.
The statue in the heart of the sporting district, a boxer who was to signify the heart of boxing in Philadelphia, who was to signify the blue-collar boxer, when all the time all they had to do was to take that camera down to North Broad Street to Joe Frazier's gym, and they would have had it right there.
The prototypical Philly fighter is really Joe Frazier. We didn't have too many Rockies in our town that ever did what the Rocky in the movie did, but we did have a guy who came here and worked his way up from nothing and won the heavyweight championship of the world and should go down as one of the 10 greatest heavyweight champions of all time, and probably won't.
In June of 2001, two fighters named Ali and Frazier squared off. Their first names were Layla and Jackie.
And the fact that both of these men were close to their children like that, it's not hard to see
that the children would feel the animosities and the tensions of the fathers. Ironically, when they both decided to take the paths of their fathers and become boxers, they didn't have to perpetrate or plan or lay out a media format or a guideline, because it was there.
Joe Frazier's attitude is, oh, my daughter wants to go for it, let her go for it. And I actually think somewhere in the back of his mind, he just would get a kick out of seeing her maybe beat Laila Ali. That's how far this rivalry goes in his mind.
3 months before their daughter's bout, Ali went public with an apology to Frazier in the New York Times. Smokin' Joe rejected it, saying, "He did not apologize to me." Ali's response was, "If you see Frazier, you tell him he's still a gorilla."
Muhammad Ali did not go to the fight between Laila Ali and Jackie Frazier live. Maybe at that particular point in time, you know, there might have been an opportunity to have some sort of reconciliation. That's what everyone's going to want to see. For them to just sit down and say, look, you know, this thing has gone on long enough.
In February of 2002, the two met behind closed doors the night before the NBA All-Star Game in Philadelphia. According to Frazier's son, Marvis, who was in the room, they, quote, talked, hugged, and let bygones be bygones, end quote. After more than 3 decades, the blood feud was over.
They gave the world 3 of the best fights you will ever see. They did what they were supposed to do. That was kick ass. You don't kick ass and say I'm sorry.
Before the fight of the century in Madison Square Garden, Joe Frazier explained why, unlike Ali, he didn't seek media attention. "I don't need to be loved," he said. "When I go out there to do my road work, I'm alone. When I get in the ring, I'm alone." In the afterlight of their blood feud trilogy, Ali basks in history, much of it etched in his own public rhetoric, while Frazier remains alone and underappreciated. If Smokin' Joe has a legacy, it is that of the gallant opponent. For SportsCentury, I'm Chris Fowler.